Hello. This is the 6th day of our conference, Criminalizing Nuclear War Systems. We have done marvelous work in previous 5 days, and you can see it on our webpage bsrrw.org, Baltic Sea Region Radioactivity Watch.org, and on YouTube, the channel RadioactiveBSR, Radioactive Baltic Sea Region. So, what did we do previous days? We analyzed nuclear war concept and its structures and systems. And then we checked more into the systemic errors within it, and we went into the law aspects of how to criminalize nuclear war systems. And yesterday we went through conceptual solutions, how to put a good system into place in our society. And today, the main theme of the day is to see how to put our findings of previous days into the realm of reality. How to get the messages connected into the higher force, so that nuclear war systems would cease to exist quite soon, so that we would get into the stage and level of prosperous welfare ecological society. So today the theme will be about different cultures and their way to communicate with high force, and what is the pure method of communication with a higher force. Because scientifically and really it surely exists. There is truth how to reach higher force. That is today's discussion. But to start our description of this, I will have to go to make a little interruption in this topic, because yesterday we forgot to bring up 2 issues. So I will start by showing how the good system of competence as a hurricane sun system is developable geographical competence map. It will be very shortly connected to this area of my previous research that you can find on gendereconomy.com and ditta.nu. And that is exactly how the dualities of all reality, all the social reality of our systems can be analyzed in dualities and ordered through them to get analysis of it. So on gendereconomy.com you can see this string of one spiral that is one ray. This spiral within is one ray of duality. And this is point 0. And this is one of the sides of duality, and this is the other. And this one is multiple profits of having competence within both aspects of duality. And this end of this spiral is the perfect top, where you are exquisitely competent and you have all these multiple profits of being so competent. And such a spiral of one duality can be used in any dualities. And if you shape them together and put them together as here into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 dualities, then you have 6 duality sun. And then you put some more in, and then you have even more thick sun. And that's how you shape these competencies of those dualities where you have acquired competence within. You create a globe of competencies. It becomes thicker and thicker, and this light within the competence is growing bigger and bigger, and the sun of your competence is growing as you develop your competence dualities. That is the model I forgot yesterday to show when I was talking about sun model of the bolts that you can find on nationalstate.info, where this little model of potato with matches is seen, which is a model of sun model of the bolts. And you have 14 topics of competence blocks there that we call competence rays, which are parameters for modeling welfare societies where we will eliminate nuclear war system era. So much for that. And now I will proceed further to other things that we haven't covered up, and that is this work that has been published just after Fukushima miserable disaster that happened 2011. And just after we had had a month's vacation, on the day when we were returning from Spain on the flight, we got to know that Fukushima has had this enormous catastrophe. And in this work, what to expect, Fukushima and health, what to expect. You can see what happens when the environment around you is contaminated with nuclear contamination, particles. So these are proceedings of Third International Conference of European Committee on Radiation Risk that happened in 2009 in Lesbos in Greece. And you can see here the list of people who have been assisting this work, which consists of 19 scientists publishing their findings. Here is a little picture with some of them in Lesbos in Greece, where these scientists all signed that the current risk model of how institutions measure consequences of nuclear pollution is wrong, and it's the main error why this pollution can be ongoing still, and the nuclear war weapons are being still filled with fresh plutonium. But here I will just show very fast the most interesting aspects for common reader. That is these scissors that indices of death rate and birth rate per 1,000 inhabitants in Republic of Belarus. If you look at the red line, and the blue line, these scissors here, then you will see that the birth rate is going down and the death rate is going up very significantly. And you can see that this is in 1992, when it has reached its crossroads. And significant downfalls are after Chernobyl. And this is genocide going on, nuclear pollution genocide system. And here is the demographical index for Republic of Belarus. But this one is very important. Here you can see the diseases. These are the diseases that occur because of contamination. And as you see, most of them are cardiovascular. So usual heart attacks and heart diseases are caused by radiation. And cancer, of course, too. And furthermore, you can see here neoplasms and infectious diseases, diseases of genitourinary system, and diseases of digestion and organs of breath. But cardiovascular systems are most affected. And here we have our conference in Latvia on the sea of the beautiful Baltic, where still fancy villas are being built, and still there is this illusion that the sea is healthy when it is the most radioactive sea in the world. And if you ask around, many people are complaining about the heart, and they are not being told that it is connected to the pollution of the shore, and the water itself is polluted, and the air in 5-kilometer radius around the sea is unhealthy. I really like this picture because this is a scan photo of the muscle of the heart. And here you can see the particles. This is a histological myocardium composition of a 43-year-old Dublin resident with a sudden death case. Radiocesium concentration in his heart was 45.4 becquerels per kilo. You can see the cesium particle dots here, these black dots, and how the heart muscle has been diluted, was turned into porridge instead of strings of tight muscles. But of course, don't forget, smoking brings you to this condition as well. And here with us, we have also one of the eminent scientists who were on this conference, the very organizer of this conference and the main editor of this book. We have few of them here. Professor Christopher Busby, I would like to ask you to come and tell a bit more about this fabulous piece of science and your findings. And this as well.
Right. Okay, well the most important thing in here, in my opinion...
In the light. Light is here.
Where?
Here.
Right. Sorry, I was asleep. There's a very short article in here about nanoparticles and radiation, which was given by Andreas Elseiser, who is my student, or was my student at the University of Ulster. And we were investigating an idea that I had which related to uranium in particular, because between 2001 and 2004 I was a member of the Ministry of Defence Depleted Uranium Oversight Board, and our job was to look at the effects of depleted uranium weapons on the soldiers who had fought in the Gulf War in Iraq. And in the 5 years before that, and over that period of time, it became increasingly clear that uranium seems to have some terrible quality in terms of creating genetic damage, destroying chromosomes, destroying genes. And later on, of course, I did a lot of work in Iraq looking at the effects of uranium in Fallujah, and wrote 3 papers with my colleagues in Fallujah and in England that showed that there were very high rates of cancer and high rates of congenital malformation in people who had been exposed to uranium. We measured the uranium in the hair of the mothers of the children with congenital disease. But the question is, how is it that uranium causes these effects? And this is what this paper is about. Because it occurred to me in 2003 that uranium has this quality of blocking radiation. It blocks it. So just like lead blocks radiation, which is why if you have an X-ray, the person who's X-raying you will often wear a lead apron. And lead shielding is used for radioactivity. The reason that lead blocks radioactivity is because it has a very high atomic number. You know that all elements have an atomic number, and if you remember your chemistry at school, you have what's called the periodic table, and you have the elements of a very low atomic number. Hydrogen is 1, lithium is 2, and so on all the way up through the various periodic tables until you get to the very heavy elements right at the bottom. And each element has its atomic number, represents the number of electrons in the orbits around the nucleus. This is how it's described anyway. So when you get to uranium and lead, you have lots and lots of electrons, and it's the electrons that block the radiation. Now, when they block the radiation, that means they absorb it. So they absorb the energy from natural background radiation, from the photon radiation. They absorb it. And the energy has to go somewhere. So what it does is it kicks an electron out from the outer shells of these elements. And with uranium, of course, it has 92, so atomic number is 92, so it has 92 electrons, and the outer electrons are easily kicked out. So what that means in reality is that if you have uranium inside you, it absorbs the radiation from the background preferentially. Or if you had an X-ray, for example, and you went to hospital and somebody X-rayed your arm, you've broken your arm, or maybe you have a chest X-ray, if there's uranium inside you, the uranium will absorb much more of the energy than normally your body would. Normally the energy goes straight through your body, which is why when you have an X-ray, it goes right through you, and they have an X-ray film behind you, and the film stops it. So you see a picture of your bones. Now the second problem with uranium is it binds to DNA. Now DNA is the component of the chromosomes in the cell, which actually tell the cell what to do, and damage to these DNA genes results in cancer and all sorts of other diseases. Now the problem is that uranium binds to DNA preferentially. So in other words, it has a very high chemical affinity for DNA. If you were to drink some uranium, it would go into your body and it would bind preferentially to the DNA in your cell. So you've got these two things. One is that it binds to DNA. Two is that it absorbs the energy and it kicks out these electrons, these photoelectrons. So the famous picture that shows this is this picture here, where you see a calculation that's been done with a very enormous great computer program that was developed in Switzerland long ago for looking at particles. And you have gold, you have water on the right. So these are the photoelectrons that emerge here from 1,000 photons. So they bring in 1,000 photons in this computer program, and you can see that with water you get hardly any photoelectrons, and with gold you get lots of them, and uranium you get a huge amount. And this is a very, very important discovery, or rather not discovery, but it's a prediction, and it's borne out when you actually do the calculations. That uranium absorbs huge amounts of energy from the background radiation, and it re-emits this energy as photoelectrons. And of course, if this is inside the DNA, it's going to re-emit all this stuff into the DNA, which is why these people in Fallujah are all suffering from congenital malformations and cancer. So the message that we take back from this is that uranium is very, very much more dangerous than anybody thought. So I think that's enough science.
Tell more about that book.
The book, yes, well the book is the presentations of members of the European Committee on Radiation Risk who were invited to come to Lesbos for a conference which was funded by a rich man who is interested in this stuff. And what they found, and what all of these presentations were about, was essentially about the effects of radiation after Chernobyl on the people who lived in the areas where there was contamination. And as Ditta has already shown you, the effects in Belarus were such that it's actually destroyed the population of Belarus. So in other words, you've got an increase in the death rate and a decrease in the birth rate to the extent that they cross over. And of course that means ultimately that there's not going to be any more people in Belarus. Because if you don't have replacement, if you don't have enough people to breed, to have children faster than the rate that they die, then you lose your population. The population is gone. And that certainly will happen in northern Japan, which is why this is called Fukushima and Health, What to Expect. So in the areas of northern Japan that have been affected by the very same radionuclides that came out of Chernobyl, those people will also suffer the very same effects. And these effects will of course be death from a whole range of diseases, heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, cancer of course. Just about every single disease is affected or is increased in its rate by exposure to radiation, and particularly exposure to these substances. I measured uranium, incidentally, in Tokyo. After Fukushima, I went to Japan, and people sent me samples from motor vehicles, from car air filters, from the engines of cars. Well, cars breathe air, and so the air goes through the filter of the car. And I told them to send me the air filters. We measured radioactivity in the air filters, and we measured radioactivity. We measured huge amounts of cesium-137, but we also measured uranium. We measured a great deal of uranium. So a lot of uranium came out of the Fukushima explosions, and of course uranium will have effects like it has in Fallujah. There will be massive increases in congenital malformation and reduction in birth rate and all the rest of it. Of course nobody knows, because the Japanese government is not letting any statistical data out, so nobody can go and see. And if anybody says anything about it, any doctors, nowadays there's a law in Japan that says you can be locked up. So that's why there's nothing coming out of Japan about all of this. So if we want to know what's happening in Fukushima, we just have to look to see what happened in Chernobyl. And this book shows what happened in Chernobyl. Incidentally, this book is now out of print, but I shall be putting this book on the internet, so in the next week or 2 or maybe 3 weeks we will have, you'll be able to download this book for a small sum, probably, I don't know, a few euros. There we are, so that's enough science, is it?
Yeah, thanks so much.
Okay.
Great.
I mean, I'm going to follow this science up with some non-science in a while, so you can have a laugh.
Yeah, because what is science? Obviously, scientists of our time have not provided reliable systems for our society to stop nuclear war. systems, and that's why we're here. We are working to find a way to change that. And as I mentioned, the day's topic is to find a method how to be in touch with the Creator, with the higher forces. And obviously it is very surprising that there are so many religions when people generally do think that humanity is one and that there is a sole creator. But we do have this enormous split and enormous amount of wars going because of all these religions fighting each other and having extreme amount of gods they pray and praise, which by scientific conceptual overview is strange. It's contradictory, and that's why we would like to contemplate on the subject, because it is really important to find a method to talk, to communicate, to be in touch with a higher force. Because if you are in touch with a higher force, then you are a divine being. That's man is the most elevated being in the entire cosmos. Such a theory is often exercised, and if it's so, then divinity itself abides within the man, and he can reach full consciousness of it with a proper guide. And here you can see these quotations from various religious works that say so. And how do you contact the sources of light and harmony to do divine things instead of creating nuclear war systems? That is a very important subject. Somehow we have in Latvia more than 2,000 churches on our very old in Latvia, which is quite a small country, we do have more than 2,000 confessions, Christian confessions. And what is interesting is that mainly they do stand on the old places of pre-Christian cult places. And these churches are closed for people who are not Christian, though they are on pre-Christian places. And what is interesting there is that, unfortunately, if you start to go into Christian community, the higher priests are telling there that the world is run by the dark forces and there is nothing you person can do. And when I was trying to find my spiritual communication with the world, I found it just not possible. That is just a lie. I know that dark forces don't run this place, and I know that I can do a lot to have impact. So, furthermore, I found it strange that I had to drink blood and eat flesh of every Sunday, and that is, I found it as some kind of cannibal ritual. And I was looking further into how do I contact the higher forces. And I personally find peace in the indigenous rituals, which bring me into contact with the light, with loving systems. And systemically would be wonderful, would be absolutely necessary to find a scientific solution of communication to higher forces. Because we can no longer allow that on our sacred indigenous places there are closed churches where we, aborigines of this area, cannot enter to do our rituals that have been put in place here thousands of years before the Christian Crusades came here and massacred 4/5 of the population to put in order their corporate order here. That has been re-established after so-called independency 1991, when the Republic of the 4th of May was created here. So, today, we would like to elaborate that the contact with a higher force can be practiced universally, and the contact with a higher power can be established, and it will uphold the entire universe. And these basic points are base of all great religions, but somehow they don't work because we are in the threat of nuclear war systems and inquisition. So, yesterday we had on screen these indigenous laws, and also on Wednesday we had the script by Steins, where he described in English the basic rules of Latvian ancient culture. The 10 Indian commandments are all about the divine higher laws and how I have to follow the higher laws to put divine existence on this Mother Earth, to create God's order, not the man's order of nuclear war. And we went through them. So this is number 1, treat the earth and all that dwell thereon with respect. Number 2, remain close to the Great Spirit. Number 3, show great respect for your fellow beings. 4, work together for the benefit of all mankind. 5, give assistance and kindness wherever needed. And 6, do what you know to be right. And 7, look after the well-being of mind and body. dedicate a share of your efforts to the greater good. Good as double O of God. Be truthful and honest at all times, and take full responsibility for your actions. As you can see, these laws are sort of different from, very different from the ones you'll get in the church, where you can sin, where you can do terrible things, and you can go there and confess every day. And what life is that? That is not divine order, because people should not do terrible things, neither to oneself or others. And if you obey 10 indigenous commandments, you will not do those things, because you will live in order with your heart consciousness. And your life will be spiritually fulfilled and right. And as you follow these rules, the reality around you will mirror your purity, and it will multiply. So, but why did Crusaders murder people who were so kind and harmonious? And still the Crusades have been going on in Gaddafi's Rome, and it's still going on in Syria, and now they're trying to start the wars here in Europe. And they are very keen on getting their third world war, to get the new world order into place. And how do we communicate to stop it? Obviously, these rules didn't help the Indians, did they? It's not that simple, because obviously God created the forces of dark to test our souls. And reasonably so, if we are so dark and unresponsible, then God will switch out the life forms of the planet as an experiment failed. That has been done before, as we know, the previous extinction levels of our Mother Earth. And even nuclear extinctions have been recognized. So, we today will have a ritual on the shore of the Baltic Sea for us to help each other to return to these spiritual laws of high force. And please stay in touch with us to tell us how you communicate with a higher force. What are your particular experiences and methodological descriptions of know-how? Please send them on info@bsrrw.org. And now I will give the floor to the eminent Professor Christopher Busby, who will tell us about his experience, which is unbelievable. He has lived in so many cultures and has seen so much. So let's see what he can say on this subject. Var du sākt jaunu sesiju?